some of us have, and Earl and I, being former Boy Scouts, by the time we were probably 10 years old, we took an oath, and what that oath said, among other things, was that we will help other people at all times. And so we go into high school and we find that we get through high school, we have opportunities, and we're encouraged to get involved, and then we sign up for college or apply for college. And what do we find? That one of the things they want to know about us is, what did we do to help our community? And that becomes a key thing that's respected and helps us to get to college, and in some cases, to get a scholarship. And then through life as we work, we go to our workplace and we learn very early that we're going to be tapped and asked to give to the United Way or to special funds or to help a colleague perhaps who is in need. And so throughout our life, philanthropy becomes a part. And in our workplace, we're often asked to go and help, to do something in the community. And then finally, in our older years, as we have more disposable income, we're asked more and more to give. And then as we think of our final legacy, we think, what resources, if we have any left, do we want to pass on to others? And so throughout the span of our lifetime, the intertwined opportunities of giving, through giving of our time and volunteering and giving of our financial resources, are very much a part of our life and a part of our culture that is very much needed to sustain our communities. So it's not surprising to find that philanthropy and volunteering in America is a very big deal. 1/4 of Americans actually volunteer, and the number may be higher than that. $390 million is given to charity each year by Americans, which is the greatest amount in the world, and we are the most generous country than any other, although in a recent study I saw that Myanmar, for some reason, was listed just above us, but I don't know if they had been looking at the politics there when that study was done. Also, 2/3 of people do something to help their neighbors. So this is very much a part of how we operate as a culture. Now in Florida, as Bob Graham mentioned and a number of earlier speakers have mentioned, we are at the back of the pack. We do not rate well. Among the 50 states plus the District of Columbia, I think in 2015, 2016, we were rated on some scales as 48th, some as 50th in volunteering. Recent analysis by Wallet Hub rated us 44th in both philanthropy and volunteering. So we are not rated well, and that carries over into other areas of civic life as well. Now, there are reasons for this, some of which Bob Graham just mentioned. One is mobility. Another is the fact that 2/3 of the people in Florida were not born here, which is a remarkable number. And then we have a phenomenal growth rate in Florida, 460% growth rate between World War II and the year 2000, which is the greatest of any state, including California and Texas. So in terms of our civic structures, we are playing catch-up in Florida. Now, all this said, we really need to tell it like it is, but we also have to tell how good we are in many ways and how good things can be. And so it's important for us to look forward, and I think we have every reason to look forward, as I had mentioned in my earlier remarks, that the All-America Cities program has given more awards to Florida cities than almost any other state. I think California may have a few more. So we do have great examples. We do have vibrant cities. We do have a lot of innovation in civic work throughout the state and in all parts of the state. So it's important that we appreciate that and build upon the good work that has been done and to encourage new work to be done. So today, what we hope to do in our panel will be to look into the phenomena of philanthropy and volunteering in Florida, to ask questions as to why is this so important to our civic culture? What are some of the obstacles that we face here in Florida, and what are some of the things that we need to learn about it? What are some of the things that we need to do about it in order to strengthen this important part of our civic life? So before we begin that, just to reinforce the fact that we do have some pretty good things going on here, we're going to ask two people to give us examples of both philanthropy and of volunteering. And in terms of volunteering, you know, not all volunteering is like showing up for a year's worth of work or 2 years' worth of work. Sometimes it's belonging to an organization in which you're just called out to do something, as my former brother-in-law did for 30 years. Whenever there was a hurricane, he would go where he needed to be in order to help. And sometimes it's showing up for a day to help, or showing up wherever it is. So we need to think of volunteering in the full range, from helping out in a moment to helping out for a lifetime. But starting with the being there in the moment and at the right time is important, particularly in a place like Florida, where, as we saw recently in Hurricane Irma, we needed a lot of help, and a lot of help fast. So would like to begin by telling that story about something that happened here that was quite remarkable and quite a contrast to Miami, where sadly a number of elderly people died because of lack of assistance in terms of a hurricane. And so I'm very pleased to invite District Chief Brian Davis to tell us a story about what happened here. And I'm particularly pleased to welcome the chief, because, as I told him, my dad was a district fire chief. So here is our special district fire chief.
Okay, so good morning. Thank you, Dr. Langton, and the rest of the panel for having me this morning. This really was an extraordinary event for us. The timing of it happened to coincide with the death of the residents in the nursing facility in Miami, all taking place within a couple hours. Obviously, that making national news on their level. But for us, we were dealing with the implications of Hurricane Irma. And backing up just a little bit, too, Central Florida as a whole, not just the city of Orlando, but all the surrounding agencies and the counties and cities, we had actually poured some of our resources into some of the other areas that were hardest hit by the hurricane previous Irma. So we had deployed personnel into Texas, Louisiana, and areas of the Panhandle. So obviously when this hits us, we're still regrouping from all the personnel and the staffing that we sent out. Unique situation here for us. One of our frontline units, Orlando Fire Department Engine 1 and its crew, went to the facility for what we call a well-being check. It's really where we just go out and we check the status on the individuals there. And the company officer from that group called me on the phone. So I'm the district chief. I cover downtown Orlando. That's a pretty big area that I encompass. My company officer on that unit reached out and said, hey, you know, this is one of our nursing homes, one of our key areas. It's a target hazard for us. It's a high-profile type facility. 12 stories, just under 300 residents, all in all. And they had been without power for 2 days. And this was the first that we were made aware of that. Even though we had an operations center in place, we were looking for individuals to reach out and make sure that we had statuses of all of these. And again, it coincided with the tragedy that occurred in Miami. But ultimately, it provided us an opportunity to jump into action and make sure that these 300 residents were taken care of. An interesting note is they had no power. Their backup generator system had failed, and despite their attempts to try to get it fixed, nobody was able to come out and take a look at that. And they are mostly elderly, geriatric population that are there with some type of assistance required. So as you can imagine, in a high-rise, climbing up and down the stairs isn't the best thing for them. So some of the crews from the fire department came to action, some of my downtown crews, and we were coordinating water and ice distribution throughout the city this same day. And then we had also heard of some of the volunteer groups that were working out of some of the churches and some of the distribution centers. And before you know it, in addition to my 15 guys that were there, we had this group of young folks that showed up willing and able to work. We didn't have to solicit it. We didn't have to call out and get them. They just showed up. They found me, the guy in the white shirt, and they said, "Hey, what do you need us to do?" And it was really interesting to watch them to come together as a team. They had leadership of some adults that were in the group that were there as well, but we basically set out a plan. We knew that we had 12, 14 stories worth of high-rise that we had to cover. We had about 20 apartments on every floor, and the goal was to touch every apartment, every person in the building, and see if there was anything that they need. And this went above just ice and water for us. Later, we received meals for these individuals that were there. That was coordinated through some of the volunteering groups that are out there. So really what this was for me, it was a pretty proud moment to work with these young folks. They came willing to help. They understood the gravity of the situation and what was really going on in this facility. And it allowed us as first responders the opportunity to take a step back and focus on some of the other areas that required our attention at this time. Fortunately, in this situation, I was able to work directly with Orlando Utilities Commission. They were able to bump up the priority in which they looked at reestablishing power for this high-rise, and they were able to do so within about 45 minutes. So it's those efforts of everybody that was there. It was the management in the building. It was this group of volunteers that just showed up and appeared out of nowhere. It went from me and my guys to next thing I know, we've tripled the size of our army that was there to help in this situation. And I couldn't thank them enough for their help. Actually, they made it pretty easy, and most of them in the picture, if you can see it, they're a lot younger than you and I, so they had no problem running 15 stories of stairs. I actually even encouraged a couple of them to put some bunker gear on and an air pack and carry all the firefighting gear that we do in a fire situation in that building. And a couple of them were pretty energetic about it. The others are like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. So, but it was a great opportunity. We were happy to be acknowledged by Dr. Langton. This is our job. I mean, this is really our responsibility as first responders. It's our civil duty, if you will, with that. However, I feel like the members here, including my members at the fire department, really did go above and beyond here. We simply could have left that to the volunteers and moved on to the next call of the day. And God knows we had thousands of them in the days to follow. But this was an opportunity where the volunteers stepped in and helped us really facilitate an easy transition, take care of the residents that were there, and the best part was getting the power restored in about an hour. So it was a great opportunity. I appreciate the acknowledgement with it. You know, really between my team and these folks here that showed up, it was pretty interesting to watch. I got to stand back as the chief once everything was in motion and got to see how these folks interacted with my folks, and it was just awesome to see. It was inspiring. It should inspire people to do more and step up and volunteer when the time is needed. We in the Southeast, including Texas, will add them into our little corner of the country, if you will, but we've seen more tragedy in the last couple years through natural disaster, through mass shooting, through anything, if you really look at that. And the amount of volunteers that pour out to help with things like that is just amazing. And I'm kind of shocked to see the numbers that Florida ranks the lowest, because you wouldn't know that. Just from what I see in events like this, what we've seen in recent tragedies and stuff, I highlight in Texas the Cajun Navy. Everybody's heard of them, right? Mm-hmm. So these are the folks from Louisiana that showed up with 20-something boats, and they were there to help. Those are volunteers. They weren't provoked. They weren't asked. They put together a group. They put together a team. They showed up, and they assisted. And they did their part. And they became famous because of it. They weren't looking for the notoriety that goes along with that, but they were doing what they felt was important as a human being, helping other humans. Same thing goes here, and it's awesome to see in such a younger generation of kids that are willing to step in and help in the time of need for somebody else. So awesome job by these folks. Dr. Langton, thank you for all your work. I was actually inspired here in the last hour listening to some of the opening comments, and we appreciate all your support.
Great. Thanks, Chief. That was very good.
Hello, everyone. My name is Avni Desai. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Dr. Langton, for inviting us. So I want to tell you a little bit about 100 Women Strong. We're an initiative from the Central Florida Foundation, thanks to Mark Brewer, who leads us at the Central Florida Foundation. But women have always been a powerhouse when it came to philanthropy. I have 2 young kids, so when I go to school and I look at bake sales, and anytime there's any type of drive, you always see women are the ones that are part of this. But something's changed since the 1990s, is now women are starting to become more of the decision makers of where actually the monetary dollars go for philanthropy. Women are getting more wealth, they're earning more, they're more connected to their communities through religious affiliations or even schools. And what's happened is women have decided to become more strategic when it came to philanthropy. And that's really what started 100 Women Strong about 12 years ago. So what we are is, I consider ourselves a group of women considered like venture capitalists. We come to the table with X amount of dollars, and we come to the table with X amount of dollars to find a source problem in the community and how we can solve it. And we look for problems in the community related to women and children. So our mission is twofold. 1, to empower our members to be strategic philanthropists, and 2, again, help women and children in the Orlando community. So as of our last grant round, we've invested about $500,000 in the community helping women and children. So let me just tell you about a story of our last grant. So our last grant had 2 recipients, the Early Learning Coalition and Early Childhood, the program at UCF. So when we talk about strategic philanthropy, we're not just writing a check based on what we think the needs are in the community. What we're doing is we're taking about 8 to 9 months out of the year and we're researching. We're bringing in experts from the field. We're looking at data to find out what the source problem is, and then if we solve the source problem, are we going to be able to solve secondary problems? So last year we focused a lot on what we decided was we wanted to help children between the ages of 0 and 5. So we spoke with neuroscientists, we spoke with pediatricians, we spoke with principals of schools, and what we identified was if we can help children between the ages of 0 to 5, there's a lot of long-term problems that we can solve. Everything from incarceration rates to getting children ready for kindergarten to higher college rates. So what we did was we researched and we found this pilot program called the Circle of Security. And the Circle of Security was typically a pilot program that helps parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and caregivers at home to help children feel secure. So if you look at a child, and they said in areas, in Pine Hills specifically, 2 out of every 4 children at some of these daycares between the ages of 0 and 5 had something called the stressed brain. So think about yourself, like in the middle of the night, if you hear the alarm go off, that fight or flight, that's what these children have about 18 out of 24 hours a day. And when these children have this stressed brain, it's very hard for them to go from short-term to long-term memory. So we decided, well, why don't we take this pilot program, and these children are sometimes in daycare from 7 to 7. So the caregivers are really the caregivers who are at the daycare. So we worked with UCF, Dr. Rank, and we worked with the Early Learning Coalition, and what we did was we trained these daycare providers to make sure these children feel secure. And we actually collected data, and what we found out is we have seen significant behavioral changes, but we've also seen that these children are able to learn better. So hopefully next year we're able to increase this sample size and get some data and also increase our population. So that's some of the things that we do at 100 Women Strong, is looking at data, looking at source problems to help solve problems. So again, we're a member-driven group. Don't let the name, we actually aren't 100 women, we're 60 women strong right now with the hopes of getting to 1,000 women strong. But what we are is we're a very diverse group of women, ages from 25 to 95, all different backgrounds, but we have one core mission. We're here to help women and children in our community in a strategic way. Thank you.